Our first reading at Mass this weekend draws our attention to the story of St. Paul. It tells us that St. Paul goes to a community of believers and they have some reservations about welcoming him, and Barnabas has to advocate on his behalf. Of course, knowing the backstory of Paul helps to understand why people would be so apprehensive about receiving him. St. Paul was a persecutor of Christians. We can read early on in the Acts of the Apostles that when St. Stephen, a deacon and martyr of the church, was being stoned to death, that Saul of Tarsus, a tent maker, was sitting nearby, consenting to his martyrdom. Saul would then go along the road of Damascus and travel there, seeking to persecute more Christians, killing more Christians, and making their life miserable. But as St. Paul is on that road to Damascus, he encounters the risen Jesus. And Jesus says to Paul, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And in that moment, St. Paul, just Saul, experiences a complete change in his life. That by encountering Jesus and hearing those words, he resolves not to persecute Christians. He becomes a believer himself and goes to Damascus not for persecution, but to become a Christian himself. So, as St. Paul, who would go around to various Christian communities, you can imagine that those who knew his backstory would be a bit reserved about receiving him into their presence. Is he going to backstab us? Is he going to turn us in? Is he going to do something to us? But yet they hear, no, this conversion of his, it's real, it's authentic. Welcome him. We as believers know so many words of St. Paul. We hear his letters Sunday after Sunday at Mass. Parts of them are even memorized, some of them read at weddings. Love is patient, love is kind, it is not boastful, and so forth. We're reminded that faith, hope, and love, and of these things, love remains. St. Paul gives an account of the Eucharist, handing down the tradition and encourages worthy reception of Holy Communion. The words and teaching of St. Paul, known by us all. But for St. Paul, then, people being apprehensive, I think maybe we know people that have underwent a change of heart, a change of mind, a change of life, like St. Paul did. That we know of maybe an addict who is on the road to sobriety, but yet we kind of are skeptical of them on their journey. We always question whether or not they're still on the road to sobriety. Or maybe someone has a profound religious experience. Their life is changed by the Lord, but then when they come back, maybe people are skeptical of their conversion. That they just say, oh, he's going through the Jesus phase right now. Or we are unable to overlook their past. That we believe that a person is the sum of all their failures and mistakes. And we're not able to see God's redeeming love and forgiveness. I know for myself, sometimes when I go on pilgrimage or I go on retreat, that's something I think about. That I've not lived my best life as a Christian follower and believer. But on this pilgrimage, on this retreat, what happens if God really breaks through and then I want to go home a changed person? What will people say? How will they react? What will I do as I go back into those familiar situations? You see, the story of St. Paul and his conversion, it was dramatic. It's well known. We've heard his story. Our conversion story isn't as dramatic, isn't popularized as that of St. Paul's, and that's okay. But what God wants is God wants us to be brought to a point of conversion too. That God wants our conversion, our change of heart, our change of life. And that as God continues to work in our life, that when we go into those environments, that maybe people will think those same things that they did about St. Paul. Who is this person? This isn't the person that I know or that I knew. But what's different? That they came in contact with the Lord. This happens every single Sunday. And this weekend at Sacred Heart, we had First Communion. That we had a dozen or more, 16 kids receive their first Holy Communion. And Sunday after Sunday and day after day, for many of us, we come to the Eucharistic table and we receive his body and his blood. And that's to be a moment of conversion. That as I receive the Lord today or tomorrow or the next day, that as I receive him, as I am united to him, as I have communion with the Lord, that my life has to be different now. That what I did yesterday has to be in the past, and that I live now more for God. Because as I receive the Eucharist, he's changing my heart and changing my life. He's making me more like him. Every time we encounter the Lord in the sacrament, that's what should be happening. We're changed and different. Maybe as we consider how God worked in the life of St. Paul and how people in that Christian community had to have their hearts converted to see him as a fellow believer. Maybe what we should be doing is asking and praying about what's holding me back from becoming who God wants me to be. How can I be more converted and more conformed and configured to the person of Jesus?